Therapist perception.
Bachelorette. Hello and welcome back to Reactivity TV. I'm Amy Albero and I'm a licensed therapist.
I am Chris. I'm not a licensed therapist, but I'm still here, still talking about this show. And this episode, I have a lot of things to say.
I love this episode. I love this season. So I cannot wait. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just get the elephant out of the way. So as you can tell, this is the first time we're recording virtually. Amy had some stuff that she had to handle business-wise in Miami. I had some business stuff that had to get taken care of in Connecticut. So we did not watch the episode together. And I actually watched it on the flight back to Connecticut. And this is actually the first time we're trying to record virtually, so we'll see how it goes. But I can't believe that this is your favorite episode. This is one of my least favorite episodes in the 2 seasons and 3 episodes that I have actually been watching this show. I can summarize my opinion of it pretty succinctly in the hand of production was overt, heavy, and lacked any semblance of transparency to the point where it actually drew me out and pulled me out of the episode and disallowed me any semblance of suspension of disbelief. Between the Q&A questions and the way that they were structured in such a way where some people got to shine and other people had nothing to work with in Group Date 1. In Group Date 2, the way the teams were stacked where it was so clear just by observing who was on the team and what costumes they were given, who had an unfair advantage and who was clearly going to win that. And then just the way the Sydney and Maria situation was edited, it was a travesty from a production perspective. That being said, hang on, because I actually have one towards the back half of this. I've got one thing I want to talk about production where I think they did a stellar job of giving us a great dichotomy between 2 situations that I want to talk about later.
Okay. All of that noted and fine. But as a viewer, as a Bachelor watcher, this is a perfect episode 3. It had drama, it had stupidity, it had lightness. Like as a viewer, I loved it. As a therapist, I also loved it because I thought that there were so many great opportunities to dig into that I'm really looking forward to talking about. So I feel like it hit right. Not saying that this is like a stellar episode of television, but for what we want in an arc of a season, I thought this hit the notes that I've been missing from this show, quite frankly.
Okay, but that's fair enough. Well, one thing I do want to point out is that my Survivor picks are looking stellar right now. I feel so good about my picks. If there was one episode that just solidified that maybe I was born to play Bachelor Survivor, this was the episode.
Chris literally texted me last night while he was watching the episode saying, I wish we budgeted for a trophy because I think I would win it. That's how confident he is right now. But we've gotten very, very ahead of ourselves here. If you haven't figured it out yet, we are giving our reactions, opinions, hot takes from Chris to this season of The Bachelor, season 28, which is Joey's season. And clearly we've already got a lot to talk about. But before we get into our episode, I would love if you could hit that subscribe button. We are right about 500 subscribers. Thank you if you're a subscriber. I would love us to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of this season. Please help us get there. That would mean a ton to us.
Yeah, if you don't know, the 1,000 subscriber mark on YouTube is really meaningful. That's when you can actually start earning ad revenue. And if we reach that mark, all of the ad revenue that we get is going to get plowed right back into the show, into increasing the production quality, getting new equipment in. We know that we've had audio problems in the past. We're trying to reconcile that and trying to resolve that. And yeah, so getting that 1,000 subscriber mark would really go a long way in helping us out. So if you're already subscribed, we appreciate it. And if you're not, think about helping us out. It's a little thing for you, but it's a big thing for us. And also while you're at it, hit that bell icon so that you're alerted anytime that we post new content to the channel.
All right. Are we ready to actually get into this episode?
I think before we do that, we have to give our condolences to poor Catherine. I mean, what happens? She leaves, to go off and be a new mom, and she, loses her spot on the couch as co-host of the show, and clearly lost her Bachelor chops, because she is doing the worst of the entire Revive staff right now in the Survivor pool. I just want to throw that out. Condolences, Catherine. We love you. I'm feeling a little bad because it's like, I feel like I stole your lunch and kicked your puppy all at the same time right now. So I personally am feeling a little bit bad, but it's still a long season. You're still in it. Who knows? Things could turn around.
Listen, Catherine, we love you. And Catherine is the most competitive out of all of us. So she's got to be hurting right now. But I'm not feeling so great about my picks. I got to be honest. Like, I feel like I'm fine right now, but I don't think all of my four have the longevity that I thought they would have after night one. And yeah, so I guess we'll have to see, but yeah, we're starting to see the pool kind of thin out a little bit.
Yeah. So let's get right into it. Because we still have 1.5 million contestants. We got another double group date plus a one-on-one, same structure. One criticism you had last, I think it was your it was your thorn last week, was that you felt that you weren't aware of who was on each of the dates, and you really wanted production to give us much more of the list off. And they did that this episode. So I thought that was noteworthy improvement, because I was actually able to keep track of like who's actually on each of the dates. So the production, I will say that's an improvement over last episode. But yeah, so we start off with the first group date, and it ends up being a Mrs. Right pageant. Little surprised, honestly, they went with the pageant because, pageants are, shall we say, taking a PR beating in, 2023, 2024. But yeah, they leaned into it, and, it was entertaining, I thought, way more entertaining than Group Date 2. So there were 3 components to it. 8 of the women were on each of the group dates. And the first component was lazy Sunday attire for kind of their runway show. Then you had a Q&A, and then you had a talent competition, and they had 1 hour to prepare a lazy Sunday outfit as well as practice their talent. So start us off. Who'd you like? Who'd you hate? What'd you think was noteworthy here?
Okay, this might be my first one of the season, but I delighted in some Schadenfreude during this group date, watching Sydney think that she was the best and so comfortable, and then watching the audience watch her and the cringe that was on their faces, that like filled me with so much joy, because I think Sydney, and as we saw throughout the episode, is very like just lacks self-awareness in
exactly what I wrote down with her. The complete and utter lack of self-awareness is amazing.
Yes, and that really shined through in her performance, and it set the tone for the rest of the episode. And while, yes, to your point, like production had a heavy hand in steering us toward a particular narrative and identifying who's a villain and who's not, or maybe who's a little bit more of a villain than the other. But we can't, while this is an edited show, we can't ignore the fact that Sydney still said the things that she said and acted the way that she acted. Those things all still happened. Yes, they're on the backdrop of music and, other edited conversations. But this for me was magnificent because it set the stage for the lack of self-awareness. And it was very clear that she did not have the support of the women. Like they were, and that says a lot. And I know we've already said this is not a girls season, but like their responses were notable because they didn't, as much as was shown, they didn't respond to anybody else that way.
We are so on the same page on this one. It's so obvious she lacks self-awareness. It's I wrote down a lot of the similar notes. It was really, really noteworthy to me how even the best that she got from any of the women was, she's my friend. I just think she's maybe blowing things a little out of proportion. That is the most support she got from anybody. And, when I talk about production, having a heavy hand in editing, I completely agree. I mean, she made production's job of editing this really, really easy, I would imagine, because of the sheer volume. It goes back to what we're talking about with Kat and VIP last. The sheer volume of the crazy coming out of her mouth. I mean, one or two sentences, you could take them a little out of context, but it's just there's so much volume here. It's hard to believe that that this was a hatchet job, by production. Especially when she's using proper nouns in her statement, so it's unambiguous who she's speaking about. And just going back to the same well over and over and over again, clearly insecure, clearly lacks awareness of just how insecure she is, and how much she is actually the problem in the entire house.
Right. Yeah. So as far as the pageant portion, Sydney stuck out to me for those reasons, the cringe factor, but also what it was forecasting and foreshadowing for us of what we were going to see in terms of her in general and the dynamics in the house. But of course, we can't go through the pageant and not talk about Lexi and the way that she navigated the questions, the talent, and just her overall approach to dating Joey. And so I guess what were your thoughts on that? She was one of your picks.
Yeah, Lexi's in my 4. So what I would say is this is a perfect example, probably the first example where production just set her up to shine. And we've said in the past, like, Lexi is the prettiest girl on the show by most kind of objective societal standards. And I was worried about the fact that she would not shine through. And it feels to me production wants her to shine, and they set her up in this episode to shine. And they gave her softball, great Q&A questions where she was allowed to shine. What I really didn't like, and I'm surprised she won as a result, was I didn't like the talent being a kiss. Now, there's a couple things I want to say here. Leah and I believe it was Edwina both took issue with the kiss, saying that kissing is not a skill or a talent, and that Lexi did less and got a greater reward. But
it was just insecure, right? Like, they were uncomfortable. They used whatever props they had to cover their face. It was just a jab, based on insecurity. I don't think they really meant that. We all know kissing is a skill and chemistry matters. Like, I think that's really what this was about. Them feeling, I mean, they both talked about how uncomfortable they were with this as the competition. Edwina sang and she's not a singer, right? And Leia was like perpetually uncomfortable. And so seeing another woman go up there and fucking own it, and own it in like a physically intimate way, something that they didn't consider or dare to do, like that's got to feel like definitely insecurity breeding. So I'm not going to take their words at face value. I think it was more coming from a defensive posture than anything else.
For me, I didn't really like that she took the, overt sexual kind of route myself. Maria's already staked at that ground, and she's quite good at that. And so I would, be afraid that I'm going to be, not able to compete on that axis. And I want to compete on an axis that I have the advantage in. But also, too, I don't know, for me, it just, I would go with something a little depthier, something that's more demonstrative of who I am as a person. And, I don't think Lexi has shown us enough to suggest that that's really who she is. Maybe, but, either way, it worked. Good for her. She won the Mrs. Right pageant. I do want to touch on a couple other quick things. Ultimately, we had Medina doing a very impressive handstandy yoga thing. Loved it.
If you look at her Instagram, she's incredibly fit. So that was not surprising.
Yeah, I was super impressed. And then Maria's like, tumbling around type thing, also quite impressive. And what I want to point out, and shout out 2 weeks in a row, Allie from the Revive staff. So Allie, for those of you who don't know, was a cheer
coach.
Yeah, and I believe her statement in the Revive chat was specifically talking about Sydney is, if you're going to do a cheer, at least do a tumble routine or something. We didn't even talk about this. Let me back up a second. the judges slash like guest hosts or something like that for the pageant were the Askin ladies from Golden Bachelor, which obviously have made quite the name for themselves. You want to talk about some great marketing? That was the greatest marketing that those four ladies probably have ever done in their entire lives. I mean, that is just leading them, because let's face it, Nancy was a non-factor whatsoever in Golden Bachelor, and she is riding the Askin train. She's getting all these things that she probably otherwise wouldn't have.
We're seeing a lot more of her personality now,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then your girls, April and Susan.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Back in action.
And Kathy's, Kathy being off Golden Bachelor, she's much more tolerable than she was on the season. She's one of those people where I think she probably went back, watched her edit, and said, "Oh, yeah, I gotta clean that up a little bit." And you see that with people, and you're never too old to grow. But I'm finding myself liking Kathy more post conclusion of Golden Bachelor. But that's all a sidebar. So the ladies did have the Asking ladies did have a big contributing voice in who did win. And also supposedly, yeah, who knows? But yeah. So anything else you want to touch on with the pageant?
No, let's go to the cocktail portion of that date. I just want to take a quick pause to tell you that Revive is hiring. In our Miami and Pittsburgh offices, we have full and part-time W-2 and 1099 clinician positions available, and this includes both postgraduate and associate level licenses, in addition to fully licensed clinicians. In our Connecticut offices, we have full-time, fully licensed W-2 clinician positions available, including clinical supervisor opportunities. If you are interested in working for a company that values community, work-life balance, and your personal and professional growth, then we want to meet you. Find a link to our website in our bio. Okay, so the cocktail party happens, and this is where we see the drama really start to pick up from last episode. There's a callback to the exchange between Medina and Maria about Medina being the oldest person in the house, and essentially Medina feeling shut down or being shut down by Maria about that. And Medina then speaks with Joey about this and says that she was, quote, bullied, getting bullied or feeling bullied in the house. And Joey asks her for a little bit more information. He asks her who said it. She said she doesn't feel comfortable talking about it. And then Joey starts to take that and run with it. So that's kind of what kicks off the cocktail portion. And then we see this kind of continue through the episode and probably into next week too.
Well, my interpretation of this was that Joey literally punted on it and didn't really do anything with it. And that was, I thought the more noteworthy thing was he kind of, he presses Medina a little bit in the conversation. Medina doesn't really want to talk about it. I didn't like that he kept pressing. It felt to me a little bit like maybe production's hand here again. And I thought Medina handled it decently well. Said, I had a problem. She even acknowledged in the statement, I probably blew it out of proportion. It's not that big a deal. I felt a certain way, but honestly, in retrospect, I really don't think it was that big a deal. He then pushes more and then goes out of conversation. And this is where it just kind of feels like production was like, no, you got to address this because it's going to make some good TV. It had that feel to it. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it could be like, but I think a big theme we see from the leads across seasons is this idea of, I might not know a person really. Like a person could be showing me one side and I might not really know them. And so it probably is so fear-inducing to learn something about a woman that you could be developing feelings about that might completely knock you on your ass, right? And so it probably feels like very unsettling to learn this and know that like out of the handful of women here, like these are pretty strong connections he has. And so like, what is he going to learn about someone that he might care about?
Yeah, and that's fair.
Perhaps I'm like mixing my timelines up, but I thought then the women were like, what was that about? And Medina said, well, I told him this. And
Sure.
that's what started some of the conversation around like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, you're saying this word bullying.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, after Joey leaves, yeah, after Joey leaves, then Medina acknowledges it was, her conversation most likely that caused him to make the statement. Of course, everybody in the room already knew that she wasn't, you know, enlightening anybody with any new information. What I will say is that Maria has a tendency to handle these confrontational situations poorly.
Mm.
When somebody says, "Hey, I felt bullied," the one thing you don't want to do to prove you're not a bully is say, "How am I bullying you? Tell me how I'm bullying you. I want answers. Give me an answer." Maybe, maybe take it down a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, in this situation, we once again saw Sydney demonstrate that she really is kind of a nasty personality, and she's really entitled and really lacks self-awareness. Definitely has that sort of personality where I suspect she hasn't been told no very much in her life. And Maria is a forceful personality. And as somebody I have a forceful personality too. I get it. I've been there where, you're not intending to be a bully, but just the force of your presence in the room is intimidating to people. It's very easy for that forcefulness to come across as aggression, and that to be off-putting to people that are not as aggressive or that are going to be intimidated. And that gives them fire. Whether or not, and pretty much most of the women have confirmed through the face of cameras that they do not think that Maria is bullying in any way, shape, or form. They just think she's aggressive, but
I think someone said like she'll tell you she's got a strong personality and she'll just like tell you how she sees it, basically. She's direct, not beating around the bush. And I just so there were two people who threw the bullying word around. One was Medina in this instance, and the next was Sydney, who does it later. And so let's take them incident by incident. Was Medina bullied, do you think, by Maria?
Medina even acknowledged that she was not bullied. She tried to hedge it back later saying, "I felt bullied." I don't know what "I felt bullied" means. Like, you were either bullied or you weren't bullied. And "I felt bullied" means I was having a moment and I overreacted and now I'm trying to hedge my way out of it. The reality is, no. We talked about this last week. Like Maria said, she's not that old. Okay, you don't feel affirmed. You not feeling affirmed is not you being bullied. And that's a big problem, because there's a lot of people out there in the political sphere right now who seem to think that lack of affirmation of anybody's idea suddenly means that you're trying to commit genocide on them. No, the reality is that you can have an opinion and I can have an opinion, and those can be, in conflict with one another. And that doesn't mean that one of us is insulting the other one or bullying the other one. The reality is Medina is 31. She is 31 years old. To some people, that might be old. To other people, it's not old. Like, it really depends on your perception and what your baseline is. But by saying you are not old, it's hard to find a scenario under which that statement in this context could be viewed as anything other than complimentary, even if the tone is one of slightly, aggressive.
Sure. Listen, very clearly not getting bullied here. Bullying has to be something that is intentional and done to hurt or harm, coerce someone. And I want to, like, I guess this is a real sticking point to me, especially someone who's worked with kids and adolescents for most of my career, and seeing kids actually get bullied versus seeing people, not just kids, use that term bullying. When we water it down into like situations like this, then it makes the actual act of bullying not taken as seriously, and that's like doing a disservice to people that are really being harmed. And so, like, let's please try to use a different word to capture my feelings were hurt, I felt shut down. Like, you're like, my feelings were validated. Like those things are all accurate too. But those, as you're saying, those things don't equate bullying. And so I have such a strong reaction to this term being used around, like, oh, so many of the other terms like that we hear so much now, like narcissist and gaslighting. Like these are real, like heavy terms that we need to make sure that we're using intentionally and thoughtfully and correctly in order to accurately capture someone's behavior. Because as Maria's pointing out, this now feels like an attack on her character. And I don't blame her for feeling that way. It's understandable that she would feel like she's being called a bully, and Joey is now contextualizing her in that way. That's valid for her to react in that sense. But that's kind of why I'm really harping on this, because again, as a mental health professional, we hear this term bully all the time, and it's not accurate. And we need to do a better job of being more clear and intentional with describing our experiences. And bullying is just too much of a catch-all that quite frankly does everyone a disservice.
Yeah, for me in that vein, gaslighting is the one that I feel gets overused and inappropriately used all the time. And
I think gaslighting was like the word of the year for 2023.
Yeah, and 99% of the time it was used, people were not being gaslit, just for the record.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
But moving on to the other one, the Sydney situation. Again, this I can make very, very succinct and easy. No, Maria was not bullying Sydney. Sydney was in fact bullying Maria, and she bullies Maria the entire episode, all the way through. This is what's the clinical term for when you do something, or when you see other people doing what you're doing?
Projection.
Projection. Sydney is absolutely 100% a bully, and she's been a bully, throwing, her weight around, being insulting, tattletale, like the whole thing, trying to gin up a bunch of support for her side, constantly attacking Maria's character, really with, and we don't see every minute of every moment in the house, but there does not seem to be a lot of support for the claims that are being made by Sydney. And she's making some pretty
I mean, on the spectrum of bullying, I guess Sydney is closer to bullying and what we would define by bullying. I even think bullying's too extreme, to refer to what Sydney is doing. It's incredibly immature, and yes, tons of projection, and the way that she navigated, to even use that word is like too generous, but the way that she dealt with the interaction with Maria later on in the episode, where she was just like, "You're doing this," and Maria was like, tell me more, like explain it to me. She's like, "Nope, I don't have to explain myself to you," and it's such an immature tactic. The way that Sydney was not even open, like could make a claim, and was then not open to having a conversation to get to understanding about it. That just seemed incredibly unfair, to say the least.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing where she like kind of storms off and she's like, "I'm leaving. Who's gonna come with me?" And everyone's just like, "I'm just gonna sit here." Like the whole thing, even their responses, the reactions of the other women are telling you that she doesn't have the support of the people in the room, and she doesn't see it and doesn't get it. And one of the more interesting things is when they were sitting on the couch, this is like speeding ahead a little bit, and I don't know who she's talking to, Edwina or Star, I don't know, somebody. There's so many women, I can't keep track of all of them. And the woman saying to her, "I think this is a moment where you just, put your head up high and you just be a graceful human being." And I interpreted that as a woman saying to another woman, maybe you just need to let all this go. Maybe you need to calm down. And in Sydney's mind, she's taking that to like bolster her up, is that I am doing the right thing and I'm going to charge forth and even make a bigger deal out of all this. And I was looking at that going like, we didn't see the whole conversation, so I don't know. And there was no other context around it, but that's how I interpreted it. And I think that's how production intended us to interpret it, as like, just the way everything else was edited. It just indicated to me that left it a little ambiguous, but I'll lean towards maybe Sydney, maybe be graceful here.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to go crazy. And that's not how she interpreted it. You know, I do want to back up a little bit here because there was some other noteworthy things in the cocktail party that I did think were interesting. For me, Maria did not have a great episode. We've seen Maria be super confident, know herself, and be comfortable in herself, in her own skin. And when she was in the cocktail conversation time with Joey, she looked very immature, very insecure. The things she was spending her time talking about are not things I would have expected her to spend her time talking about. She tried to pretend like she's an introvert. It's like, we've seen enough of you. You're not an introvert. Don't play that game. She tried to play the whole, I'm not comfortable. It's like, even Joey's like, you're comfortable in front of a crowd. What are you talking about? It just felt like she was trying to manufacture another side of herself and give Joey what she thinks Joey wants. And none of it was genuine. And it just didn't come across, in my mind, did not play well. And Joey called her on it nicely, because he's a nice, respectful guy. But he called her on it and was like, you're good in front of a crowd. And yeah, I don't really see that. You seem pretty comfortable with everything. And you say you're not talented. You literally just did a gymnastics tumble routine that was pretty damn impressive. Like, come on, like, what are we talking about? So I give Joey a lot of credit there. I got some criticisms for him later in the episode, but I give him a lot of credit there because he's clearly very into Maria, and he could have just let it pass, but it felt like he pushed back on her. And called her on a little bit of her lack of genuineness here. And I appreciated that out of Joey. And Maria is in my fourth Survivor, so I really wanted her to do well. But this for me was a weak episode for her, even though I don't think this Sydney stuff is gonna harm her and her chances. I do think that she did some other things this episode that weakened her position with Joey.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think that it's difficult to tell at this point. Is she someone that's potentially a little bit of a chameleon? Is she someone that's or is it a little bit more performative? Like, I guess we'll have to see, and see if we actually meet like the more like real sides of Maria. I'm not sure that we will.
Yeah. Yep. Anyone else you want to talk about in the cocktail party before we move on?
Who got the group date, Rose? I don't remember.
It was your girl, Kelsey A.
Oh, why?
Good, but my notes, exactly that. Why? Question mark, exclamation, question mark. I don't get it. So here's the thing. Kelsey seems like a perfectly fine young lady. She's pretty enough. She's nice. We haven't seen anything. There has not been any depth to character. We haven't seen any real meaningful time. We see 5-second clips of the two of them together here or there, but nothing to like grab onto and sink your teeth into. I don't understand what he sees in her.
I think if I'm thinking of it in a completely different way, and again, having watched the show before, which is obviously there's so much that we are not seeing, and I'm wondering why production is not showing us these deeper moments with Kelsey A that warrant this connection that Joey has and this group date rose that she's earned. That for me builds my confidence in my pick in her, in that they're gonna frame her as a little bit of a dark horse.
You think they're sandbagging on us?
Perhaps.
Interesting.
So I don't know. I'm curious if any of you who picked Kelsey A have theories about why she's still here and why she got that group date rose. Please drop it in the comments. Let's go to my new girl crush, Jenn, and her one-on-one date.
Well, I was just going to mention next day, before we move on to the one-on-one, we do have that short little scene where Medina and Maria, they have a conversation. Medina just looks like she does not want to be having a conversation. She just wants it to end. Maria's, again, not really handling it particularly well, but just trying to squash it, right? And you do see Maria just constantly wanting to squash it. Medina just also, I don't think she necessarily wants to squash it. She just wants it to go away and just never talk about it again. But the problem isn't between Medina and Maria. The problem is between Sydney and Sydney's insecurity. And Maria is the embodiment of Sydney's insecurity. So there's nothing that Maria is really going to be able to do short of self-eliminating that's going to resolve this situation. There's no talking to Medina that's going to resolve this situation. So again, I feel like this is again Maria demonstrating kind of a lack of really understanding and maturity of the situation.
Right. Well, and Sydney's sort of using this situation with Medina as almost like the scapegoat for why she's like leading the charge against Maria.
Yes.
Where Medina, we clearly see, is over it, like
Yeah,
by
yeah.
all intents and purposes. Yeah.
Yeah, it almost looks, Medina almost looks uncomfortable even having it brought up or talked about at this point.
Yeah,
She just wants
right.
to go away. Yep, exactly. All right, so yeah, there's a reason why I picked Jenn in my top 4. She's so cute. She's so fun. She just seems like somebody that you can just have a good time with and is going to be chill and laid back, and just good person to be around. So she gets the one-on-one date and they go surfing.
Okay, so Joey, obviously living in Hawaii, he learned how to surf and whatnot. So we see Joey get to a couple times this episode get to see him show off his athletic ability, which is cool. Jenn, it appears, has never surfed before. She's feeling a little anxious. They had a fun date. The thing that I appreciate about Joey though, is he's not afraid to compliment these women. And like show his attraction to them. And the reason that I bring that up in this context is because on this show, especially the last couple of years, there's such an awareness of that it's a show that I feel like we've seen the leads, especially the male leads or even just the male cast, like edit themselves so that they don't potentially get canceled. And so we sort of lose some of the authenticity or just like the organic nature of just connection and compatibility and chemistry. And so I love that Joey's kind of owning, you know, when Jenn comes out in her wetsuit halfway up and like her bikini top, and he's like, you look good. Like I just appreciate the authenticity coming through, and he's not afraid to put his attraction out there in a way that's respectful too.
Yeah, you know, Joey for me, and I've made this criticism in the past. There are moments where I think he's very genuine. I think he's a very nice guy. And I think it is in his nature to be overly nice, to the point where sometimes it's not genuine. The reality was the girl who played the trumpet in the thing was not a good trumpet player. Edwina takes a tremendous amount of courage to get up there and sing. She's an awful singer, right? But he's like giving them tons of praise about how great they were. It's like, you can't convince me that that my eyes are and ears are lying to me, right? And so I do think I agree with you. There are times where it's really truly, it's clearly genuine. He's such a nice guy, and I think it all comes from a good place. But it does sometimes for me just reach the point where it's like, I don't believe you. I don't believe that you're like madly in love with 32 women and you think all of them are great. There's going to be some duds in the crowd that you're just not into. And you don't have to tell us that, but you also don't have to go the other direction and be like, oh, they're all great. It's like, no, you know.
He's still playing a part in a TV show.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but sometimes, you know, silence is perfectly an acceptable response sometimes too, right? That's all I'm saying is, you know, you don't have to be mean, but you don't necessarily have to go the other direction either. So there are a bunch of things about this date that I want to talk about. We'll get the fluffy nonsense stuff out of the way first. Did you catch Joey asked Jenn your favorite question?
What was the question?
What's your favorite color? For those of you who might be new to the podcast, Amy rails on this question all through BIP and about how it's the most meaningless question in the world and, quite frankly, stupid. And so it's kind of become a running joke. And yeah, so we saw that out of Joey this episode.
At least he wasn't commenting on her eyes and the eye color and just naming colors, you know.
So, all right. So the date itself went really, really well. You know, they talked during the dinner after, where she expresses that, you know, her father's not really in her life anymore and her parents didn't model a good relationship. And I'm a little bit nervous for my pick in Jenn. And this is why. Okay. I think there are two axes on which Jenn is problematic as a finalist. The first is that she runs a serious risk of being friend zoned. She's so cute and so fun and so much fun to hang out and spend time with that I almost feel like I'm seeing too much of buddy and not enough sexy, right? And I don't mean sexy in an objectifying way.
Romantic.
In a romantic, like, yeah, they kiss a little bit, but you don't feel the spark like you feel.
I agree.
Like,
I don't see a lot of romantic chemistry there.
Yeah. She just is a really pretty girl who seems like so much fun to hang out with. And I think that can actually work against her in the long term because she has to spark that romantic connection. And, if you're just too fun and too, kind of chill and go with the flow, there is a level of you need to be a little bit flirty here. And I am not seeing flirty. I'm seeing fun. And those are two birds.
Well, I almost think they're too similar in that way, because I think Joey's very laid back and Joey's very fun. And so it's almost like you need one of them to be a little bit more dominant in a sense. Like I feel like it's an easy relationship to just be comfortable in and be friends in, because I think they're almost too similar personality wise.
Yep, completely agree. The second axis on which I have concerns, and this is a little bit more of a deeper cut that's a little more psychological, and so I really want your take on it.
Oh boy.
So she talked a lot about her family dynamics, and what you have a saying, and you're saying, you've said it on this cast a couple of times. Show me who your friends are, and I will show you who you are.
Okay.
And I adhere to a slightly different saying, and that is, show me who your parents are, and I will be able to tell how you're going to do economically and how you're going to be in a relationship. And what Jenn has basically done here is stated effectively that she doesn't come from a family that has successfully demonstrated a successful relationship, and that she, has broken ties with her father. Now, none of that is her fault, right? And that's not to be held against her. But the question that if I were Joey, that I would have liked to have seen from him that I didn't get was a recognition of the impact that family, what you observe in childhood is, how you're more than likely going to grow up to, behave and believe in similar situations. There's a reason why the number one predictor of what your economic wealth is going to be and number one predictor of the length of your marriage are what your parents did, right? You can literally throw every other factor out. That one factor dominates all other factors for those two characteristics of how successful somebody's going to be in those two areas of life. I would have liked to have seen Joey ask the question, I hear you're saying that, all this about your upbringing. What have you observed, and how has that impacted your understanding, and how are you not going to fall into the same, kind of traps or pits or whatever phrase you want to use? Like, how are you not gonna fall into the same behavioral patterns that your parents modeled for you? What have you learned from their experience that you are taking and internalizing, so that you don't follow the same path? That was the correct question in my mind that Joey.
Great question.
What's that?
Great question.
Yeah. And I just think, and look, Joey's 28 years old. What the hell does Joey know at 28? So it's not unfair of me at 40 to be saying that that's the right question you should have been asking, but that's the right question you should have been asking here. Because her answer to that would have alleviated a lot of my concerns potentially, or just outright eliminated her, in my mind, because I think she's a wonderful young lady, but I would want to know the answer to that question before.
Yeah. Well, so I just want to make sure I'm clarifying what you're saying, because since you went on for a while, I don't want what you're saying to be misinterpreted. You're not damning someone who came from a home where there was divorce or there was tumultuous relationship to being unsuccessful in a relationship, correct?
Correct. Yes.
What
I'm
you're
saying that.
saying is that what is probably a better predictor of success for people that have had those experiences growing up, maybe grew up in a single parent household, or again with a lot of conflict, that they've done some reflection or learning about how that has impacted their view of relationships, marriage, commitment, conflict resolution, right? I just want to,
Exactly.
I mean, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I just
No,
more
no.
want to make sure that's what you're saying.
Yeah, no, no. And I think you said it more succinctly.
Your question that Joey could have asked is a great one. And that's something I was thinking about while I was listening to Jenn. And I think, listen, I was just having a conversation about this with a young woman today who not exact same upbringing, but similar and similar fears around how can I, as someone who never saw what I want modeled for me, how can I be successful in a marriage or in a long-term relationship or as a parent if I've never seen it before? And a lot of times, I mean, that's such a valid, totally valid fear and worry. The way we learn, especially as children, social learning theory, we learn through modeling. And so, like, when we don't have a model for what we want or what we feel like we need, it is incredibly anxiety provoking and puts us at a disadvantage. So the fear is valid. But to your point, thinking about what we saw versus what we want and trying to find a way to bridge the gap through other examples in our life, other models could be helpful, but also thinking about like, hey, I saw my mom and dad manage conflict this way. I saw my dad essentially move down to the basement for 6 years and it was never addressed. Don't really want to do that. As a result, I haven't really learned how to deal with conflict. I need to go figure that out because I don't want to, I know I don't want to do it this way, but I don't know what else to do. And so there is this sort of inventory and self-reflection that can happen if you've identified that a goal of yours is to be in a committed relationship. And being able to try to pull from and learn from and apply forward things that you didn't see and know that are important or know that you want. I would also be asking the question, how do you think that growing up with your parents who were living separately or separated has impacted your view of yourself? What does that look like? How have you dealt with this? That sounds really tough. And so I think those things are helpful. As a short aside, though, one thing that I'm remembering from charity season when Joey was on is that Joey had so much insecurity around the fact that his parents were divorced. And he saw that as a bit of not a flaw, but as something that he was kind of worried about. Like, I don't, Charity's parents were married for like 50 years. And so I think he was feeling insecure that like, oh, I don't have that as a model. And so it wouldn't sort of shock me if Joey sort of made some assumptions in to Jenn's benefit of, well, I know that I didn't grow up with parents that remained together, and I still feel good about where I'm going, dating or marriage wise. Maybe she does too. So it's possible that he makes assumptions to her benefit because he didn't grow up with having two parents that remained married.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, ultimately, you said all of that way better and expressed the point that I was trying to make way better than I ever could naturally.
That's why I'm here.
I mean, that's literally why what you do for a living. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's that those are the two axes on which I am concerned about Jenn. I think that the friend zone is more likely going to be what gets her eliminated from this competition ultimately. But we'll see. I mean, I like her a lot. She's so much fun. And she's just, she's just a nice person to have around.
It's just probably good for the morale of the house.
Oh yeah, I would think so. Yeah, exactly. Shall we move on to group date number 2?
Let's do it.
All right. So we got another 8 women who go on a second date, and this one is playing tennis. The show brings in 2 supposed tennis pros, a male and a female. No idea who they are. I don't follow tennis. I'm sorry, tennis aficionados. It's not a slight on the game. I played a lot as a kid. I only have enough time to follow one sport, and the NFL is my sport. So, but apparently Joey's a big fan of these 2 pros. and they gave the girls some lessons. Now, here's where my complaints come in with production again. They pair them up and they're playing doubles, and they all are dressed up in costumes. I've said multiple times, Evelyn looks like a tennis pro.
You have said that. That was exactly what I was thinking when I was watching this, is Chris keeps calling her a tennis player, and oh my God, her serve. I mean, I don't play tennis. I don't know what a good serve is, but she had some athletic ability, some power behind that serve.
That's it. She just looks like an athlete.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter what team you were going to put her on. She was probably going to win. But then what do? They put her with the other girl who basically looks like an athlete too. These girls didn't have a prayer shot of winning. Like, it was so clear. And then the second factor, they dress them up in these costumes, which whatever, the whole cute thing, whatever. But I'm sorry, there is a significant difference in your ability, your mobility.
Sure.
When you're in a fat baby costume versus you're in like a hot dog and bun costume. Yeah. So, I mean, of course, they stuck the two athletes in the costumes with the most mobility on top of it. It was like production. You're not even like trying to make us pretend like we don't know who's going to win this. So that was my other heavy hand complaint about production. Other complaints, they weren't even approaching the rules of tennis, but that's okay. I mean, it's all in fun. But yeah, so thoughts on this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I loved the puns. I mean, this is like, again, like the silliness of The Bachelor. Like, yeah, okay, fine, it's so stupid. Like, but good, bring it on. Love it. I loved how into the baby stuff Daisy and Autumn got. They like really
that was the best part.
They really played their roles. It was funny. We saw a different side of Daisy. Like, she was like really silly. So that was fun to see. And I think, again, like, what are these dates for? They are totally assessing someone's ability to go with the flow, not take themselves too seriously, get out of their comfort zone. And so that's what I really appreciated about both of these dates, the pageant and this date. We had opportunities to see both sets of women, like, see how seriously they take themselves, and or not. And I loved just seeing just the complete silliness of it all, like seeing Kelsey T with the butter hat and Joey's reaction to that. I mean, it was just good. It was fun. And I think that Catherine and I have talked about this in previous episodes of Reactivity TV. Like, while there is so much emphasis on connecting through like almost like trauma dumping, as a way to get vulnerable, there's an even greater ability to connect through laughter and joy and playfulness. And I thought that this date was such a good opportunity to kind of see, because you can't fake playfulness. Like, you can't fake that. Like, you really see someone's ability to just go with it and be silly or not. And so I think this is a really good opportunity to like get vulnerable quickly, get to see and know someone pretty quickly, and see what they're like under pressure or in lack of familiarity. I loved that about this date. Heading into the after party of date number 2, for me, there wasn't a lot of very notable things. I quite frankly didn't even remember who got the group date rose until you reminded me offline a few minutes ago. And it was Caitlin. And the thing that Caitlin definitely is a little, what's the word? I was going to say off brand. Like, she's not your typical contestant. She's a little, she's a little different than what we see. And I think we see that a little, her quirkiness, like through some of her interactions, but she did have a conversation with Joey about what she referred to as her family curse. And this was there was a part of me that while she was saying this to Joey, I was scratching my head and thinking like, A, why are you telling him this? It doesn't sound particularly flattering. And going back to the point that you and I were making about Jenn, she's also not demonstrating a lot of self-reflection or awareness about what she's going to do differently. Like, leaving it to the universe is not going to be super helpful or instructive in getting her what she wants. To break the curse, that would have to be something active that she does rather than passive, like, let me leave it up to the universe. So I wasn't really a fan of that conversation, though I do think that's so much of the dialogue that happens these days. I was very surprised that Joey gave her the rose. What did you think of that? Why do you think that he did that?
I mean, for me, this was a kind of weak back coward moment for Joey. One of his, he has a tendency, and we've seen it, whoever gives the biggest sob story in these group dates, he just kind of gives the rose to.
Did that feel like a sob story?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. I mean, it was, she came into the thing like thinking that this was a great idea to tell him this in the delivery, and it was
Mm-hmm.
it was a miss on every level. And I don't. It kind of demonstrates her kind of immaturity with relationships and really just fundamentally not understanding kind of the male brain and how we process things. It was a colossal miss everywhere, and I would fully expect that she's going home next week as a
Mm-hmm.
result, and she doesn't
Mm-hmm.
even necessarily see it coming because she, I think, thinks that this was a win. But no, it was pretty.
Like she won the battle, lost the war kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, she got the rose because Joey has a tendency to kind of give the rose to the sob stories. I like what group date rose has Joey given that we thought made sense? There's a pattern here, right? And so I kind of at this point disregarding who's winning these roses in the group
Yeah.
dates because they're not meaningful in any way to kind of who I think he's actually interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I thought that there were a lot of things that Caitlin said that were very, very problematic and
Mm-hmm.
huge red flags across the board. That from going back to the Jen thing, she's, it is showing that she has not been modeled successful relationships in her family. And unlike Jen, doesn't even seem to have an awareness of that fact. And, kind of laying on the crutch of a family curse instead of some sort of acknowledgement or accountability that there's something that perhaps they're doing or some outlook that they
Mm-hmm.
have or that they perhaps need to look at. She just strikes me as somebody who really doesn't fundamentally understand what
Yeah.
marriage is, what guys are looking for, what guys think, and it just has a lot of growing up experience and self-reflection and reflection upon her upbringing before she's really ready to take steps towards being married. That would be my take on that. So juxtapose this against Rachel's conversation with him, where she went ahead and compared him to her father, showed a tremendous amount of appreciation for him, as well as kind of expressing how or kind of indicating that she has a good model for what a healthy relationship is. Putting those two back to back next to each other was a great job by production.
Mm-hmm.
Based entirely on those two scenes alone or those two conversations, I actually think that Rachel has legs to go very deep, and I'm a little bit worried that I did not put her in my 4. If I were able to sub people in and out, I would be seriously considering subbing Jen or subbing out Jen and putting Rachel in
Yeah.
based solely on this one conversation.
Yeah.
Caitlin, on the other hand, I think she's dead in the water. I think at this point it's purely on borrowed time. Her shot at winning this is effectively 0
Mm-hmm.
based entirely on this one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think so too. And I think it will be interesting, and we're about to get into the cocktail party and rose ceremony in a second, but I think the thing to also remember is that starting next week, they're going to start traveling. And part of what I imagine the Bachelor, Bachelorette considers when they do these trips is like, okay, who's going to be chill and cool and non-problematic for the house to travel with. And so like while he might not be moving while he might be moving certain people forward that aren't necessarily a love match, they're good for, again, morale. They're not going to be drama starters. Like, so I do wonder if some of the choices are that as well.
Yeah,
More
I
of a
could
community pick.
Yeah, and I think production probably plays a big factor in those decisions as well.
Yeah.
I would imagine. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the only other person that was noteworthy was Daisy, where again, I mean, Daisy's running away with this thing. I feel really good
That's
about
what we
having
thought
her.
about Faith from Golden, and look how we ended up.
Faith was top two, right? So
Top
at the
three.
end of the day, top three. Oh, you're
Yeah,
right, top three.
Leslie.
Top three. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Anyway, um, yeah, I mean, the way Daisy circled back on
I loved
everything.
that.
Yeah, I thought the way she did it, it was how are you feeling now that you've had time to process? He met her in kind with the same sort of empathy and curiosity, and you can just tell that they have a genuine connection, and you can tell that they are both really into each other, and the way they interact is very different than the way he interacts with anybody else. The conversations are deeper. They're not Golden Bachelor deeper, but they're definitely deeper than you'd expect to see on this show. And it just feels to me like she is the prohibitive favorite to win this show at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
She, she's just unproblematic, and she demonstrates so many wonderful qualities that, and she's pretty and she's fun. Like I just like where are the demerits? I'm not just not seeing them,
Yeah.
and
it wouldn't shock me if she's our next Bachelorette if she doesn't win this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would be more shocked if she doesn't win this at this point. Like something would have to really, really turn.
I mean, yes and no. They just might not show us everything. Like Kelsey A could just come out strong around when there's a top six, or like when they get to home. You never know on this show, so I feel like you can't trust what we're seeing now.
Yeah. So we'll see. Anybody else you want to talk about before we get into
let's get into the cocktail party turned pool party sponsored by KFC. Very clearly sponsored by KFC. But even here, I don't know that there's so much to talk about. We already covered a lot of it when we were talking about the Sydney Maria drama, but what about the cocktail party stuck out for you?
I mean, this can be a real lightning round thing for me. One, pool party with KFC, aggressive choice.
Yeah. Yes.
Two, I don't believe for half a second that any of those women eat KFC. They look impeccable, and I don't think any of them have been eating mashed potatoes in the last 10 years. Three, I did not know KFC sells French fries. That was news to me. I also haven't been to KFC in a while. I was always a three strip.
I didn't know that they sold mac and cheese.
Oh yeah, no, of course. Yeah. Yeah, I was always a three strip with mashed potatoes and gravy. That was always my meal back in the day. And the last thing I'll note is worst pool party ever. I don't think one person actually went into the pool. It also didn't necessarily look that warm.
Mm-hmm.
No, but I don't know. It was pretty much run down by what we've already talked about, the Maria Sydney stuff.
Yeah.
Sydney decides that she's going to go and talk to Joey, and you can just tell right away that Joey is into Maria and Sydney's not on his radar. So Sydney coming and telling him that, he's sort of playing the game of, oh, I've got to pretend like I care, but really honestly don't really care. And that is the impression that I got. He did, he pulled her, but there's a couple I think important points here. One is, I love the way Maria pushed back on him. Well, what questions did you ask? You just took this girl's word for it and you asked no questions? He's like, yeah, you're right. The fact that he capitulated so fast on that point also tells me that he wants to side with Maria, right? And, immediately acknowledge, yeah, you're right, I should ask more questions. What does he not do? He doesn't then turn around and go ask more questions. He lets it lie. He's not into Sydney. She's not winning this thing. He's into Maria. He's sort of doing what he has to do to get through this. And next week, we already saw in the previews, they're doing a 2-on-1. And we all know that one person gets the rose. It's so stupid on production's part because
it's just annoying that they would waste a 2-on-1 here.
That's exactly it. Exactly. Like, we know who's going to win. He's telegraphed the entire thing. He's doing what he has to do here, pretending to do the due diligence. But the reality is he's done none because he doesn't care, because he's Yeah,
The
he's
worst outcome is that he's like, honestly, I've lost trust for you both. You both go home. That would make me very disappointed, especially because Maria has the support of the house. Like we've seen this. Like sometimes the lead interviews the witnesses. Um, she'll get the full support, you know?
and that's the thing is if he's actually interested in Maria, he will do more due diligence.
Yeah.
He will go back to Medina, right, at a minimum, and say something. If he's not interested, sure, he's going to punt her. Guys are not that thoughtful about these things. Guys are simple creatures. I either like you or I don't. And if I don't like you, I'm going to concoct any reason to justify dumping you. And any small reason is good enough. If I like you, I am going to bend heaven and earth to find a way to keep you around. And guys, it's really that simple with guys. Like we're not that complicated. And you saw it demonstrated with Joey. He's into Maria. You know, he the way he engaged on the entire thing indicates to me that his mind is already made up. And, he might do some token due diligence, but, Sydney is going home, Maria is staying, and that's just going to be the end of it. And that's the way it should be. And, and if he sends them both home, it means for whatever reason, he wasn't actually into Maria. He's just like making out with her, but, he's now got other girls to make out with, so.
I guess time will tell. So yeah. So rose ceremony happens. Lexi gets first rose. I know you don't put a whole lot of weight into that, but it's meaningful to me. And Sydney gets the last rose.
Jenn had the one-on-one rose. Kelsey A had the group date 1. Caitlin had the group date 2.
Yeah.
And we kept 15. So there were 12 more to go. Lexi starts us off, as you pointed out.
Right. So who went home this week? Evelyn, Krissa, and Star.
Correct. Yep. Happy you asked about my rose this week.
Love it. My thorn this week.
I hated to see that.
Rose and thorn time?
Yeah. Go ahead. Start us off.
Okay. I feel like this is a cop-out, but I have to do it. And I hope that you watched the outtakes.
It was like they came into our house and just filmed me talking before I ever started doing this podcast with you. And I would just be sitting on the couch, and that's exactly what it was. How many times have I said, like, why does he come in every time? Like, they can count the rows. They see the rows, right? Like, talk about adding value, Jesse. Yeah.
Right. So yes. So my rose goes to Jesse Palmer yet again. I think he probably has gotten the majority of my roses the past, two seasons. I loved that he poked fun at himself. I loved that he was sitting in a floaty, eating KFC, just talking shit, trolling himself. And I just love that. I love when someone can make fun of themselves, and it was great. And yeah, he kind of said what we're all thinking. So a level of self-awareness there, that the show is aware of, like, kind of its absurdity. So I love that. He and that segment got my rose. That was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, typically I never want to double up on a rose, but that was literally the most perfect scene I've seen in any of these shows that you've had me watch and react to the point where I'm actually, it has to be my rose too. Even though
we can share.
We've never done that before, and probably will never do it again. But I loved it so much in an episode that I otherwise really struggled with, from a production perspective and from a plot line perspective, and from a decision-making perspective. So yeah, it was fantastic.
So since you're saying that basically the entire episode got your thorn, can you narrow it down for us? What was your thorn this week?
Really just the amount of times that the girls said, after group date 1, how out of my comfort zone I was. I'm tired of hearing that. It was just every single girl was playing the same tune. And it was just like, come on, like, you knew what you signed up for. Like, come on. None of us believe you. So let's just move on.
It's low hanging fruit as a way to sort of connect.
It's lazy is what it just felt lazy to me.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Yeah. What about you?
I think my thorn goes to Sydney, but specifically the interaction that I mentioned a bit before, where Sydney basically was accusing Maria of something, and then said, I don't want to indulge in this conversation. Basically, it was and mostly because it was like personally triggering to me. It's something that I'd recently experienced, being accused of something, trying to understand where the person was coming from, and then being told like, I'm not going to dignify that with a response. Like it's just such a frustrating and unproductive way and immature way to engage in a conversation. So I think because it just hit a little close to home, that's going to get my thorn, because I had to like relive that experience. Okay. So we did it. We did our first virtual recording of Reactivity TV. Gonna thank you for your grace and patience. I'm sure you'll still leave us some feedback in the comments. We welcome it. I imagine we're gonna have to record virtually at some point during the season again. So appreciate the feedback and know that we're also working on it. We will be back next week for episodes 4 and 5 of The Bachelor. Like Chris said before, not sure of the release date schedule, but stay tuned here on our channel. Again, hit that bell icon so you get notified when we do drop those episodes. You can also now follow us on Instagram at Reactivity TV. We have a whole new account dedicated just to this show and to the Bachelor franchise for now, and any other shows that we might cover in the future. So go give that a follow. I would love to get that account up as well. Let's get that to 1,000 followers too. So go check that out. We'll put the handle in our show notes as well. Also check out our other podcast, Wishing You Well, which is where Catherine, my therapist co-host, and I help you navigate your wellness journey. We've had such great conversations. This past week, we had a fitness expert on talking with us about postpartum fitness and movement for motherhood. It was a really inspiring episode, whether you are a mom or in that stage of life or not. It was great. We also have an episode coming out next week with a hormone expert that will help us learn more about cycle syncing and eating for your cycle, which I'm really, really interested in. So again, stay tuned to this channel on YouTube, where you can check out Wishing You Well along with all of our Reactivity TV content. You can follow us at Revive CFW, our website, revivecfw.com. You can follow me at Amy Albero LCSW. And again, follow this podcast on Instagram at Reactivity TV. And I think that's it. We will be back next week. We'll see you then. Bye.
See ya.